This is Henry Cosley. I'm so glad you joined me again on my Human Behavior YouTube channel. Yes. You know, as I mentioned before, I earned a Master's of Arts degree in Human Behavior from National University in La Jolla, California. So I am amply qualified to speak in the area of human behavior. Yes. And you know, I've lived it. At nearly 71 years of age, I have lived it. I remember back in 1968, I was nearing my 18th birthday there in Memphis, Tennessee, living with my grandfather. The assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. I heard his speeches. I listened intently when he was in Memphis. And I lived it. And when you think about it, how many people in 2021 can say they was in the same city at the same time in 1968 when Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated? I lived history, tragic history. I can. Yes. So today, I'm going to talk about prejudice and racism. An interesting human behavior topic or topics. First of all, let us define prejudice and racism. Now, prejudice refers to a preconceived negative idea about a particular group, while racism involves unequal distribution of power on the basis of race. Yes. Now, sociologists have found that racism has led to a wide range of detrimental outcomes for people of color. You know, which includes unequal access to jobs and housing, and the list goes on. Even all the way up into what? Police brutality. And we know about that. We've been hearing a lot about that in the news over the past few years. Actually, it's been going on probably much longer than that. It's just that now we have, cell phones, huh? And we can video the wrongdoings of people who are paid to uphold the law, but are breaking the law. Yes. Now, sociologists have found that racism have led to a wide range of detrimental outcomes. Yes. And from a sociological and human behavior perspective, members of privileged groups can experience prejudice, but their experience will be different than the experience of someone who experienced systemic racism. Yes, it will be different. Now, prejudice is a prejudgment that one makes about another that is not rooted in their own experience. For example, from a human behavior and sociological standpoint, you know, the belief that African Americans are unintelligent and lazy, you know that stereotype. It kind of makes me remember back and think of the old movies with the black actor named Lincoln Perry. He played the character Stephen Fetching back from about 1927 to 1939. The character that Lincoln Perry played was a befuddled, mumbling, shiftless fool. It made him a star, but he didn't get the billings and make the kind of money that his white counterparts made. No. And Perry was really America's first black movie star. Yes. But he paid a heavy price for playing the role of step-and-fetching, a bumbling, shiftless fool. Yes. Yes. Now, prejudice is a prejudgment that, as I said, that one makes about another that is not rooted in their own experience. And you know, such stereotypes and jokes about a person's perceived that a person is a certain way, right? Shiftless, lazy, can be considered prejudice. And some prejudices are racial in nature and have racist outcomes. But not all forms of prejudice do. That is why it is important to understand the difference between prejudice and racism. For example, many of us have heard the term used in movies and in society, the dumb blonde. Essentially saying that a woman with blonde hair is somehow dumb. That's how they portrayed it. And while such name calling can often result in feelings of anger, frustration, and discomfort for the person being called the name, a person's hair color doesn't appear to be racial in nature, nor leading to racial outcomes. In other words, there is no research to suggest that someone's blonde hair color affects one's human rights. Yes. And this form of prejudice is unlikely to have the same kind of negative impact as racism against an African American or another person of color. Now, race scholars Howard Wyant and Michael Obey defines racism as a way of representing or describing race that creates or reproduces structures of domination based on essentialist categories of race. In other words, racism results in an unequal distribution of power on the basis of race. Because of this, when a white person uses the N-word to refer to a black person, it does not simply signal prejudice, but using the N-word to refer to a black person reflects and produces a negative impact which affects a whole culture of people who have actually been referred to the N-word dating back to slavery. Yes. So, when you call a black person the N-word, you're not only just disrespecting that black person, you're also disrespecting a whole culture of people. Yes, you are. Now, racism is more than just personal bias. Racism is systemic, meaning it is institutional. A form of racism that is embedded through laws and regulations within a society. Yes. And systemic or institutional racism issues stems what? Discrimination in criminal justice, employment discrimination, housing discrimination, and discrimination in many other areas in our society. Now, prejudice is a preconceived opinion against someone that isn't based on actual experience or reason. For example, if you decide that you think all Asians cannot be trusted, even though you have only ever met one Asian person in your life, then you are prejudiced towards Asians. Yes, you are. And you may have heard people say, well, I have a black friend, so I can't be racist. Yes. But being racist isn't about the people you associate with. It is about your behavior. You remember that human behavior we're talking about towards people of color in general. Yes. So having that one token black friend doesn't mean you can't be racist. No. So, how do we institute human behavior changes for racial prejudice and racism? We can only institute change when people seek to understand the dialogue around prejudice and racism. This means that white people must realize they can't be just a part of the problem. They must also strive to help to be a part of the solution. So all black people are trying to say to white people, because racial division in this country is predominantly along the lines of black people and white people. So all black people are trying to say to white people is, walk a mile in my shoes. Try to understand the life I live as a person of color. Yes. You see, prejudice and racism against black people in America have been going on since slavery. This is nothing new. Everybody knows about it. And for someone to claim that there is no racism is a cop-out. Is in denial. Yes. Well, the 15th Amendment was supposed to guarantee black people the right to vote. But exercising that right became another challenge for black people. Black Americans got the right to vote 150 years ago. But because of voter suppression, it was still a big problem trying to vote. So it was the 1965 Voting Rights Act, which cemented voting rights for black citizens in this country. Yes. Yes. So, while some progress have been made in our country along the lines of racial healing, we still have a very long way to go. Long way to go. Yes, we do. Because racism and prejudice still is embedded in this country of ours. Systemic. Yes, it is. And this goes back, as I said earlier, all the way back to slavery. So it's deep. It is deep. Yes. And so for black people or African Americans, it's been an uphill battle for blacks, for us. Because prejudice and racism continues. And it probably will be for quite a long time. Yes. Embedded in the fabric of our country. But in order to bring healing and to make it better. Right? It takes all of us working together to heal our nation. You see, if you cut me, I bleed red. And I don't care what other color you are, if you get cut, you bleed red. Your skin is just a pigmentation. Yes. So, it takes all of us working together to heal our nation and to speak up when there's injustice. But when you see injustice, such as police brutality and all these other things, and you sit back and say nothing, and you know it's wrong, then you are just as worse as the problem itself. Yes. You are just as worse as the problem itself when you see and know that it's wrong, and you do nothing about it or say nothing about it. So, I would like to know your comments, your thoughts on prejudice and racism in this country. What can we do to heal the country, to bring it together? There's a lot of racist people out there. There's a lot of people on all sides that is racist. But the biggest problem of racism stems along the line of blacks and whites. You know, back in when we had Jim Crow and segregation and all of that, the South, who is the only group of people that whites didn't want to go to school with? You see, Hispanics have always went to school with whites. They didn't have to necessarily integrate. Orientals have always basically went to school with whites. They didn't have to necessarily integrate. It was blacks. They didn't want to go to school with blacks. So you understand what blacks or African Americans have went through since slavery. And so, walk a mile in my shoes or in their shoes. Understand how they're feeling and what they're going through. This is how I believe we can make our country better, can come together. But if you're a person that just want to hate to be hating, and that's the way, and if that's just the way you want to live your life for the rest of your life, I feel sorry for you. I really do. But if you want to love your fellow man and treat him as you want to be treated, then when you see injustice, when you see people, no matter what color, are not being treated fairly or right, you say something, take a stand. Yes. And these kind of things can help rid our country of some of this deep embedded prejudice and racism that we have here in America. Yes, it can, I believe. So, let me know what you think. What's your solutions to racism and prejudice? Yes. Please like and subscribe. And I'll see you next time.